absolutely no sign of any cognitive impairment whatsoever. He was as sharp and incisive and as good a writer as ever. He wrote over 100 books. In the 60s, 70s, 80s, he did extensive lecture tours in America, Australia, and all over the world, and had a couple of periods of being extremely famous, but he mainly shunned all that and spent most of his life after his first book came out in the 50s, avoiding the press and living a quiet life with his wife and kids in a remote cottage in Cornwall, where they lived to the end of their lives. And I first came across the work of Colin Wilson in my early 20s, when I was sort of looking to understand my own brain and why it didn't do the things that I wanted it to. And he's been a huge influence on me and continues to be so. And he was a big fan of Gurdjieff and Ouspensky. He wrote an excellent book called The War Against Sleep about Gurdjieff, which I'd recommend to anyone. And his main work, To the Outsider, his first book, which is a bit, as I said to one of my listeners who's just bought it on my recommendation, which is great, it's a bit kind of pretentious in a literary sense. I think it's trying too hard to be over literary, but he was 24 when he wrote it. But it's an exposition of all the great existential writers, but you can see his own theories coming through. And then his masterwork really was his 1970 book, The Occult, which I have in front of me. Now, please don't be put off by my use of the word occult. I think it's unfortunate that he gave the book that title, but as he said himself, the book wouldn't have sold anywhere near as well if he didn't. But in fact, the word occult itself, the actual word, simply means hidden. And Colin Wilson was using it in the sense of the hidden psychological potentials of human beings that are locked away in our subconscious, but that we let fester and ignore because we're so wrapped up in the immediacy of our consciousness and the stress and over sensory stimulation of everyday life. And that was very much the core of his work. So I'm going to start by reading a sort of chopped down version of a couple of pages from The Occult that I've put together for you. So I'll say this book was written in 1970.